Welcome, everybody, to session number 23. If you're not supposed to be in 23, now's your chance. We're going to talk about our first goal, zero fatalities, injuries, and crashes. We thought this year, instead of Carlos and I trying to go into a very lengthy conversation at lunch about our goals, we would have a breakout session on each one of our goals. So today is Linda, Terry, and Jason. We'll have other senior leaders tomorrow talking about the other two goals. So this is the first of the series. I'm sure it'll go well. I have a bio that's like really lengthy, and I'll just not read the whole thing. But Jason Davis was appointed UDOT Director of Operations in August 2013. He's a native of Price and graduated from the Utah State University with an electrical engineering degree. I'm going to read your entire bio. Is that okay? Okay. Terry has been at UDOT for 15 years in various roles and is currently the Region 3 Director. That's it. This is how every bio should be. This is Terry. She's been here a while. Linda Holt is UDOT's primary liaison with the Utah State Legislature and U.S. Congress, along with other national transportation organizations on legislative and regulatory matters. She holds a political science degree from the U. I don't know if I ever really knew that. I'm sorry. There's hope. All right. We'll get started. I think Jason's first, and then who's up next? Linda, and then Terry. We'll clean up. So is there time for questions at the end? Do you know?
Sure, there will be.
Jason's at the end? Oh, he's going to do twice? Oh, we're in for a treat. I'm staying for this, so. Welcome these guys.
So Shane is correct. I'm batting leadoff and cleanup in this presentation. So just kind of what as Shane mentioned, I'm the operations director for the department, which has approximately 300 employees. Could everyone in operations raise their hand? Okay, so there's about 280 disciplinary actions I need to take after this presentation. Front row, motor carriers, my favorite group. Anyway, so as Shane mentioned, we have our three strategic goals are going to be discussed by senior leaders during this. And last year during the conference, the decision was made to make some changes to our strategic goals, and this was one of the big changes that happened. And we had basically went from a zero fatalities goal to a zero injuries, zero crashes, zero fatalities. So all the above. We realized that just looking at, while fatalities is a very tragic and important thing to prevent, there's also a greater portion that we can have an effect on. And so that change was made, as well as to make it first on the list, which seems like a minor thing, but it matters. And we have people all the time that used to ask, oh, how come increased capacity is at first, or optimized mobility, or whatever, which one's listed first. We always had people who noticed, which was interesting because I never really paid attention to it. But now that zero fatalities is first, I notice, and it matters. So we have spent a lot of time as a department working on performance measures for this, and you'll probably hear more about it in different presentations. I think Shane might mention a little bit in his talk tomorrow as well. Oh, so so we have spent a lot of time in the last year going over performance measures and looking at it from the standpoint of, if you measure it, then you can make changes, you can come up with strategies. And so we have measures both internally and externally. So we are going to have a report here soon that will be out that will show our internal and external injury crashes or injury incidents, our internal and external fatalities, and we all hear about the external fatalities, and we do a fairly good job of preventing the internal fatalities, which is a goal that if you've ever been to the complex, the central office, there's a rock back in the middle of the campus that has the names of those who have died in the line of duty for UDOT. And it's a pretty, I don't know, it's meaningful to me. So I'll go out there every once in a while and think about things and get my head straight and get back to work. So we do have these performance measures. They will be shown here soon on as we improve our internal communication. Carlos mentioned Matt Allred this morning, who's over that area, and they've got a lot of strategies on how that's going to happen in the future. And I don't want to steal anyone's thunder, but I'm looking forward to it. With that being said, we are going to kind of tag team this subject. I'm hoping for my presentation to go well, and the other two, I'm sure they'll do fine. So, well, it's all about me. So we're going to start with Linda. Linda Hall is our, as Shay mentioned, she really figures out how to get things done on the political front, which is where a lot of our challenges start out. And she made a difference, a big difference this last year in getting this priority seatbelt law passed. And she'll tell you it wasn't all her, and there was a lot of support cast, but she definitely led the charge. So I'll turn it over to Linda.
Is it hooked up? Do I need to hook that back in? Well, I'll start off while she's doing that. So it kind of cracked me up when Jason said, how many people are in the operations group? And a whole bunch of people raised their hand. And I thought, how many people are in the legislative services group? It's me and half of Elizabeth Waite. That's it. That's my whole division. So it's not many of us at all. But while she's doing that, before I came to UDOT, I've been with UDOT, next month it will be 19 years, which is a really long time. And prior to that, I worked as a congressional aide for 7 years in Washington, D.C. So I've been in the political field now for quite some time, and I love it. And I love it especially when I can do something that really helps make good policy for the state and makes things better for the agency that I work for and makes things better for Utahns in general. So Kristen used to be in my group, half of her, but now she's, in Jason's group because he sucks up everybody. So, yeah. So the reason I'm going to talk is because the primary seatbelt law was such a big initiative for the department. That was our number one legislative goal for the last 2 years. And a lot of people were really surprised by that. When we met with the governor's office, they asked us, okay, well, what's your number one legislative goal? They expected us to say money. And without hesitation, Carlos and I both said primary seatbelt law. And they looked at us with kind of this blink, blink, blink look. And finally they went, oh, so this is really important to you. It's like, yes, that's what we've been saying. There's nothing else that's more important than a primary seatbelt law. So I was just going to touch a little bit on why it was so important for the department, why it's such an integral part of our zero goal, and a little bit about how we secured the law. So first I thought I would just take some time explaining the difference between a primary and a secondary law, and I have to grab my Diet Coke. Excuse me about that. So just to explain the difference, it all comes down to how it's enforced. So you have traffic laws that are on the books. When it's a primary law, if law enforcement sees you run a stoplight, they can pull you over because you ran a stoplight and cite you for it. When it's a secondary law, if you weren't wearing your seatbelt, even though it was the law that you had to wear a seatbelt, they can't see that you're not wearing a seatbelt and pull you over. They have to wait for you to break the law some other way. So they have to wait until you run that stop sign, then they can pull you over for running the stop sign and then say, oh, plus you weren't wearing a seatbelt, so I'm going to write you up for not wearing a seatbelt as well. So that's the difference between a primary and a secondary law. The reason that it was so important for us as a state and as a department is because when we look at states that have primary laws, their seatbelt use rates are up to 12% higher. We'd like to think that people put on a seatbelt because it's just the right thing to do. We'd like to think that people follow the law because it's just the right thing to do. But the reality is a lot of time people do it because it's the law and they don't want to get caught and they don't want to get a ticket. I think most of us do it because it's the right thing, but there's plenty of us that are doing it because, you know, you have to. So that's why it was such an important thing for us to have a primary law. If I can do this right. Ah, sweet. So as a department, when we were meeting with legislators, we were telling them as a department, we're doing everything we can to make roadways safer. We're doing a lot of engineering and safety improvements. We're putting up cable barriers, we're putting up crash barriers, we're putting in rumble strips. There's a lot of things that we're doing to physically make the roadway safer, and it's made a huge difference in terms of safety on our roadways. But we also partnered with the Highway Patrol, with DPS, with private partners, and we did education initiatives like Don't Drive Stupid, the Click It, Don't Ticket, Click It or Ticket that's from the Highway Patrol that was trying to educate the public. And so through these kind of education outreach programs, we've reached about 500,000 people around the state, but it still just wasn't enough. You did everything that you could, but that secondary law was still holding us back, and we needed to do more. So as a department, we are a data-driven organization. This is primarily an engineering type organization, and I'm not an engineer, but I get engineers. My dad is an engineer, my brother's an engineer, I married an engineer, I've worked with engineers for 19 years. I kind of get how they think. So this is a data organization. So we're driven by data. And when we look at data and we're looking at what we can do to improve safety on the roadways, we're looking at data. And so this is one of the charts that we shared a lot with legislators during the session. So when you're looking at the contributing factors to a crash, you're looking at the first gray bar there, pedestrians, bicycles, motorcycles. The red is people who are unrestrained, people who aren't wearing a seatbelt, distracted driving, and alcohol-impaired driving. So when you're looking at that, and we looked at it over a number of years, and we looked at why are people dying on the roads, the number one contributing factor year after year after year was failure to wear a seatbelt. So here is the primary reason, the leading contributing factor why people are dying on Utah roads, and it's failure to wear a seatbelt, and we're sitting here with a secondary law, not a primary law. So that's what drove us to say we've got to do something about seatbelts. Some additional statistics that we looked at. We know statistically, looking at information that comes from NHTSA, from the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, we know that seatbelts are the single most effective device that you can use to improve roadway safety. A lot of times what I hear from people is, well, I'm going to make my kids buckle up, or I'm going to make my grandkids buckle up, but it's my right not to buckle up, and if I don't want to buckle up, I shouldn't have to because I'm only endangering me. Well, in a crash, when you're unbuckled, you become a projectile. You're just a missile bouncing around inside that car if you're lucky enough to stay in the car instead of being ejected. And we know that statistically it's 40% more likely that you will injure or kill somebody else in the car because you're not buckled up. We also know that when people are ejected during a fatal crash, 3 out of 4 people die when they're ejected from their car. So these are all statistics that we looked at. And then we looked at, I'm sorry I still had 2012 on that. I meant to update that number. But when we're looking at people who aren't buckled up year after year, it's about half of the people that die on Utah's roadways, excluding people who don't have the choice of buckling up. So you're excluding pedestrians, bicyclists, and motorcyclists. So if you're looking at only that body of people that have a choice of wearing a seatbelt, about half of them died on Utah roadways. Now the reason that that's so significant is because about 83% of Utahns prior to the 2015 legislative session were buckling up. And so you think, well, that's pretty good. 83% of people are buckling up. But reverse it and think 17% of people still won't buckle up. Even though we're doing all this education outreach, all this effort, 17% of people don't buckle up. That 17% is overrepresented because they're representing half of the fatalities. I like to play the odds, and those aren't odds that I would want to play. So when we're looking at that and we're trying to really reach this zero goal, we're not going to reach that zero goal when we've got 17% of people that aren't buckling up and they're representing half of our fatalities. So when we looked at that, we realized we had to make this our #1 legislative priority. As a state, we've worked together with the Highway Patrol and with things like Intermountain Healthcare. We've worked with entities over the years to try to get a primary law. UDOT, though, has never taken a lead role in trying to really push for that law ourselves. We'll say that we support it, we think it's a good idea, but we really wouldn't put our organization on the line to get it, and this time we put our organization on the line, and we pushed very hard. It consumed a very significant portion of my time and a lot of people's time to be able to push for that law. So one of the key things that I wanted to point out, to be able to get something like this, you've got to have strong, strong leadership. So with Carlos Braceras at UDOT and Colonel Danny Fuhr at the Highway Patrol, they were both really personally passionate about getting a primary seatbelt law. They spent a lot of time educating and talking to legislators about why this was important, talking about the statistics. We looked at Representative Perry. I didn't have a picture up here, but Representative Perry and Senator Bramble are the ones who carried the bill for us at the legislature. They are both just personally passionate about this and really believe in it. Representative Perry, as a highway patrolman, has always been committed to it because he sees what happens on the road, but he had a personal commitment because some of his constituents, some teenagers had died in a crash and they never should have died. You looked at that crash and you looked at the condition of their little pickup. You can't believe that 3 people died in that crash because it hardly was beat up at all, but they weren't buckled up and they were ejected and they died. And the parents of those kids came to him and said, "You've got to do something about this. We can't let this happen to other families and other children. We need to make sure we get that primary law." So he carried that passion at the legislature, and Senator Bramble has been against a primary seatbelt law for many, many years. But when I talked with him, he said what changed his mind is he flies planes. And when he gets in his plane, he's got this 5-point buckle and all this safety stuff, and he realized if that's important enough for me in my plane, why isn't it important enough when we're in our car? And we impose restrictions on people driving all the time. We tell them, yeah, you can drive on Utah roads, but you have to have a driver license, you have to pass a test, you have to get this kind of score when you take your driving test, you have to have a car that has all these kind of features, you have to have insurance that has these specific requirements. We impose requirements on people all the time for the privilege of driving on Utah roads, and to him, this was the same, that this is a requirement for you to have the privilege to drive on Utah roads and make it safer for everyone. And their passion really carried a lot during this session. Another big piece of this was the coalition that we had built. You always hear from the Highway Patrol, you always hear from healthcare providers, you always hear from a Department of Transportation how important it is to do something with a primary seatbelt law. What you don't get are businesses and other organizations that weigh into this and talk about this is important to us too. So we worked at putting together a big coalition of people. The Salt Lake Chamber of Commerce was just so invaluable to this initiative. They helped bring all those business entities together. So it was the Salt Lake Chamber, it was the Trucking Association. It surprised me that the Trucking Association adopted a resolution in support of a primary seatbelt law. They did, and that was really helpful. The Workers' Compensation Fund, entities like Rocky Mountain Utility Providers, CenturyLink, Safe Kids, all these entities that came together. Penna Powers provided a lot of support and help for us. We all came together as a coalition, and we put together a list of messages that we had to put together. It sounds stupid, but you have to make sure that you get your facts straight, because there are so many times I go to a committee meeting at the legislature, somebody gets up and testifies, and somebody presents a set of facts. Somebody else gets up and testifies, it's a different set of facts. Well, which facts is it? And it undermines your credibility when you're not all using the same facts. So we spent a lot of time as a group sitting around and deciding what the facts were. And Kristen Hoschauer was our lead person in driving that steering group. And she was an integral part of what she did, and she can tell us how hard it was sometimes just to get everybody to agree on what the facts are. Once we agreed on the facts, we worked with Penna Powers, and we put together the messages. These are the key messages we want you to talk about. Everybody has a different angle, but stick with these messages because people need to hear the same facts and the same issues over and over. My rule is somebody has to hear something 3 times before it finally sinks in. 3 times. That's the rule. So everybody is saying exactly the same thing. We're all using the same messages. And as a result of that, we got a bill through. Now, as part of any legislative process, there is concessions and compromise that's made. There were concessions that were made to be able to get a bill through. One of them is that the first time you're pulled over, it's a written warning on the first offense. The second time, you actually get a citation. So one of the things that we have to do post-session is figuring out, okay, how do we make sure if a policeman of law enforcement in Perry pulls somebody over and then they get pulled over a second time in another city, how does the law enforcement from the other city know that this is the second time somebody's been pulled over? So we had to get that information and that reporting process in place so that we knew that it was the second time somebody had been pulled over. A second part of the concession is that they had an option to waive the $45 fine if you take a 30-minute online course. So you could get a seatbelt ticket as many times as you want and get online and take your little courses administered by the Utah Safety Council. Take your little course and it waives your $45 fee. So legislators wanted to make sure there was a way for people to be able to waive the fee. And this was the biggest concession, that the bill was sunsetted after 3 years. That after 3 years, so it's only a valid bill for 3 years, and in 2017 it goes away. But the reason we accepted that is because that's what we needed to be able to demonstrate 3 things. We have to show seatbelt use rates will go up, that fatalities and serious injuries will go down, and third, and most importantly, the sky didn't fall. That what I hear from people is, oh my gosh, if law enforcement's going to pull me over because now I have to wear a seatbelt, the world's going to come to an end, my personal rights and privileges are over, and we wanted to demonstrate that's just not going to happen. One of the things I want you to keep in mind is that when we look at primary and secondary traffic laws in Utah, we added it up. There are 413 primary traffic laws in Utah. The seatbelt law makes it number 414. So if law enforcement wanted an excuse to pull you over, prior to the passage of this law, they had 413 reasons that they could pull you over. This was just number 414. So when we looked at the primary versus secondary laws in Utah, there were 413 primary laws that the legislature felt were so important that law enforcement should be able to pull you over. Only 2 things that they felt wasn't important enough to pull you over. One of them was failure to have a license plate on the front of your car, and the second one was failure to wear a seatbelt. I don't know anybody who died because they didn't have a license plate on the front of their car. Neither of my cars have them. But a lot of people are dying every year because they didn't wear a seatbelt. So we're committed to this. We believe that by having a primary seatbelt law, we think our seatbelt use rates are going to go up. We think fatalities and injuries will go down. We think that based on statistics nationwide, we think that we're going to save many lives every year because of it. And so that's why it was such a high priority for us and such a key provision of our zero goal. And so now I've done my part. The law got passed, and now it's Jason's responsibility and Kristen's responsibility to implement it and make sure that in 2017 we can come back with the statistics that show that this made things better, and in 2017 we're focused on making this a permanent law. That's it.
Okay. I'm going to talk a little bit, repeat a little bit of what Jason already said in talking about the way our goal has changed in the last year. And I want to hit probably the same 3 points he did. But you know, the first thing is we were really, I think maybe as leadership, viewing zero fatalities as all-encompassing of safety, and yet it didn't explicitly say that. So the addition of zero crashes and zero injuries added that safety component to it that we think was really important for us to do. Second thing was we made it the #1 goal. And I find that really important because I think whenever you're faced with a really hard decision, what you do is go back to your goals. And if safety is your #1 goal, then you have to err on the side of safety with every decision you make. And to me, that's really important. And I think what that does is encourage us to be questioning on that. If you need to question your supervisor, question employees, question your peers on whether or not they're being safe, this gives you the ability to do that. That empowers you to be a questioning person on this. The third piece of it that is my topic is about internal safety. Now, this doesn't explicitly, when you look at this goal, it doesn't say that that's a concern of internal safety, but I think the important piece about this, Jason hit on a little bit, is we are trying to put together performance measures that relate directly to our 3 goals. Our performance measures that we're planning to do for internal safety are going to look at employee injuries, employee crashes, and employee fatalities, and we're going to be measuring that. Leadership cares about what happens with employees, and if we don't measure what's happening with injuries, crashes, and fatalities for our employees, how are we going to get any better? And what we need to be able to do is create a safety culture. And so that change means we have to have our eyes on the numbers. That's what leadership's job here was, to create the measure and then make sure that we're making improvements on it. So I've just taken the numbers I have that Dan is our safety manager sitting in the back of the room. He gave me these numbers. So it's Region 3 numbers only that we have from the last 6 years. And you see the line going all over the place. So it doesn't really look like we've got a trend there. And I'm not great at statistics, but you can have Excel print or put the trend line on for you conveniently. But when you look at the trend line, you can see the dashed line is the trend that we are going down on our accidents and going down on our injuries. And that's important, that that's generally the direction we're heading. We're going to have blips in that as we go through the years, but generally if we're trending downward, that's where we need to be going. So one of the questions that comes up when you start talking about zero crashes, zero injuries, zero fatalities is zero the right number? Some people philosophically can't get their head around zero being a goal. You have to have a goal that's achievable, and do we really think we'll get to zero? I think you need to keep in mind with this, at least for me at Region 3, and there are some Region 3 people in the room, none of them want to raise their hand and be the next 2 injuries we have. And so for us to say zero is the only acceptable answer, I think is appropriate. If we don't get to zero next year, does that mean we're going to go crazy about that? No, but for us to have a goal anything other than zero is almost impossible for us to do. We can't imagine wanting anybody to be those next injuries. So when you think about the goal of zero, keep in mind we want to keep the trend line going down, but we don't find any amount of those being acceptable. And I think that's the same kind of discussion that has gone on with zero fatalities for quite some time. Let's now just translate that to our employees. So my discussion for the next few minutes is going to be about internal safety. So I'm going to do it by way of a couple of stories. And sorry, Brent Schwanevelt gave me this photo. He's actually in the photo, but I don't think you can pick him out. It's a little dark on the photo to see him. But anyway, Brent does canyoneering in his spare time when he's not at work. And as I was trying to prepare for this safety presentation, anybody who has to ride to a meeting with me or spend any time with me knows that I'm going to pick your brain about stuff. Oh, I can't see eyes now. Sorry. Yeah, I have to see eyes. I can't tell stories without seeing people. Feels like I'm talking to a wall. So I think it's important for us to be discussing things as an agency, and if we want to have a cultural shift to being a safer organization, we have to be talking about safety more often. So poor Brent rides to a lot of meetings with me, so I pick his brain a lot. So anyway, we were talking about canyoneering. Many of you know about the flash flooding we had in Zion Canyon, and there were 7 fatalities related to a weather event. But I don't know how many of you are aware that at the beginning of October there was another fatality in Zion due to with a group that was canyoneering. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that incident because I think sometimes it's easier to talk about things outside of our agency that are happening and talk about safety with those and then bring those ideas back into the department. So with this particular incident, it was a group, I think it was 5 or 6 people. They were going to rappel down a canyon, and all the things you read on the blog and the stories you read about it afterwards, they were all very experienced. They were all safe people. They had the right training. They had the right equipment, which is what we all say all the time. Oh, yes, we're safe. We have what we need. We have the experience. But then when you have a group like this, and it ended in a fatality, and as it turns out, it was an issue related to a rope being too short. And I said to Brent, how can that be? How can you have your rope be too short? And don't you have a backup plan? You know, just kind of really pushing him on it. I probably shouldn't have done it because he was driving, and I shouldn't have distracted him while he was driving. But anyway, I think the conversation is important because he said that he carries an ascender with him, which, if I get this wrong, Brent, correct me, but a mechanical device that allows you to go back up the rope without the group having to pull you up. Is that close enough? And I said, well, why wouldn't they have carried this device with them? You know, when their rope was too short, then you climb back up. And he said, well, some people don't carry it. And I'm like, well, why wouldn't they? That seems crazy. Well, it's another piece of equipment you have to carry that you hope you never need because your plan is to go down the canyon, not up the canyon. So I said to Brent, well, why do you carry yours? And the answer he gave me was because he has people that care about him. And I think that's a really important answer. And that was kind of made me start thinking about what it is that gets people motivated to be safe. And I think that's what we have to start getting at if we want to have a safety culture. It can't just come from leadership saying we want our numbers to be better. We want numbers because we care. But when the employees read that and say, you just want to get your numbers better, but why do the employees want to be safer? So you think about that, and there are people that care about you. That's a really important reason for trying to be safe. So everything kind of gets me off on a tangent, and I started thinking about some other things. So I'm going to go on to this next story. So this is a Galaxie 500. This is the car that I remember as a kid. And the picture's a little bit fuzzy here, and maybe that's for a reason, because this is, I don't know if you can see in the back seat. There's a little kid with his arms up over the front seat, leaning up to where his parents are. So that was never the case for me. My dad had seatbelts in this car in 1965, which is very unusual. I hear all these stories, people my age and younger than me, and I'll reveal my age. I'm about to turn 50. It's kind of a big one. But people my age and younger grew up with this experience of, oh yeah, weren't road trips great when you're a kid? No seatbelts, and you get to lay in the back window, play games. That was not the case for me. I grew up in a totally different atmosphere. So I started thinking about this. I'm like, was I imagining that, or did I just think my parents were horrible and made me wear seatbelts all the time when nobody else had to wear them? So I had a little text message conversation with my dad. I do talk to him also, but it was we had a text message conversation here. So just trying to get my facts together a little bit on the Galaxie 500, and he said, yeah, it was a 1965 model. And then I asked him about, did you order it with seatbelts in it? Because that's what I had always understood. My dad's this crazy person who ordered a car with seatbelts. But his answer that he gave me back was, he thought that car had them in it, but that their cars they had before that, they installed seatbelts themselves. And I was like, what? Seriously? Nobody else was wearing seatbelts and my dad was installing them in the cars. So again, this got me thinking a little bit, and I started, dramatic circling of the installed seatbelts there. Dramatic effect. So it got me started thinking about what was going on at the time, and I didn't really understand what the seatbelt laws were and any of the issues related to automobiles, so I did a little Google searching, because that's what I do, and ended up finding out that Ralph Nader, when he was in law school, wrote a book, but he actually published it in 1965, Unsafe at Any Speed. And you can agree with Ralph Nader or not, but he got a lot of questions being asked and got a lot of discussions going. To the point that his concern was that automobile manufacturers had the ability to make cars safer, and they were simply choosing not to do it. And his concern was something needed to be done about that, and in fact, as highway engineers, as people that build highways, we were not doing what we could to make facilities safe enough either. And so that's what he was trying to bring out in this book. So within a year of that, Lyndon Johnson signed if I could get this correct, Linda probably knows the title of this, and Jason probably knows it, the National Traffic and Motor Vehicle Safety Act, 1966. So that was the year I was born, and this is just kind of the atmosphere that was going on at the time, is he signed this act into law. It did many things to require automobile manufacturers to start making vehicles safer. One of the things it did was require seatbelts for all passengers. And by 1968, that was a requirement for manufacturers. And one of the things that Lyndon Johnson said in his speech when he was signing this, and it's a statement that a lot of people still remember or have heard of before, that at that point in the century, we had had 1.5 million citizens die in automobile crashes, and that is 3 times the number of Americans that had died in all wars. And so that number was really got people moved to action. And at that point, you can agree with federal laws about safety or not, but President Johnson at that point felt there was a need for us to be safer as a society, and he felt as a leader he needed to take that move and push for federal law that would require automobile manufacturers to start to be safer. So this is what was going on around the time. So then I follow up with my dad and say, well, what motivated you to put seatbelts in the car? And here was his answer. I know, aren't they so precious? And the one crying, I don't know how you'd figure out who that one might have been, curly hair and such, but anyway, yeah, that is me and my brother and sister. So I just want to use that as to point out, along with Brent's story, he has people that care about him. My dad had people that he cared about. I think we have to start getting to our motivations for being safe. It can't all be requirements. We also have to work the other side of this as well if we truly want to change our culture. Okay, so I'm going to shift gears on you a little bit. And this picture is familiar to, is Marshall back with the group? Oh, Marshall left? Oh, okay. Anyway, Marshall was back there. This is from the Lehigh Shed where Marshall is the supervisor. And anyway, I'll not get ahead of myself too much in this story, but at the regions, we do what we call semi-annual visits with all of our maintenance stations twice a year. That's why they're semi-annuals. And when we go there, we usually have conversations. This particular round, we had conversations about safety and safety becoming our #1 goal. And I encouraged everyone that safety being our #1 goal meant that they needed to question things. And they needed to push back a little bit against me, against their supervisors, and make sure that we were doing things in a safe way. And it was not the Lehigh Shed. Nobody here back in the corner has to be uncomfortable. It wasn't your shed where I asked the question and got the answer. Oh, Steve? No? Okay, wasn't you guys either. So I asked the question, do you think that I make decisions that tell you I don't hold safety as the #1 goal? And it got really quiet. Nobody answered. And then somebody said yes. And I kind of took a deep breath and said, okay, let's hear about it. And they said, well, we had a road rake in the budget, and you cut the road rake out of the budget, and that tells us that you don't really care about safety. And I'll tell you that the importance of the road rake for any of our sheds that take care of I-15, most of I-15 in Utah County has barrier along both sides. The litter can't get off of I-15 unless somebody picks it up. So this happens to be a pile of litter that was picked up off of I-15 on a 13-mile stretch during one run of picking up litter. I'm getting a lot of shaking heads. Yes, I'm getting my story straight back there. So this is what's picked up in one run along 13 miles of I-15. And you look at the size of some of that stuff, it's not all going to be picked up with a sweeper. And if we don't have a road rake, that means every time one of those larger pieces needs to be picked up, somebody's getting out of a vehicle and becoming a pedestrian on I-15, which is not the situation we want to put our guys in. There's enough situations where they're at risk, and if we can minimize that by giving them the right equipment, that's really important for us to do. So that really hit home with me, and our next round of budgeting for equipment, we pushed really hard to get a road rake back in our budget, and we were successful with that, and we have it ordered now, and it should be on its way. Hopefully we'll have another, yes, we'll have another road rake in our lineup. So just want to emphasize the importance of we as leaders need to get people to question what we're doing and push back. I didn't see the gravity of us cutting the road rake. We had other reasons for doing it, but when faced with that, it was a pretty important thing for us to put back in our budget. So we need to have leadership aware that we're providing the right tools for everyone. And if we're not providing the right tools, we need to have a little bit of pushback on that. That's all part of creating the safety culture. And then just give you a shot of this is just a partial picture of what the road rake looks like. So very important tool for us, setting the right environment so we can be safe. So now I just want to talk a little bit too about what employees' role is in creating a safety culture. So leaders need to provide the right tools, get people asking the right questions and supporting the employees, but what do employees need to do? I'm going to use an example of Southwest Airlines. They have a very strong culture of customer service. In March of this year, they had an incident where employees were very empowered to act and make decisions based on this culture they have. They had an issue where there was a woman on a plane. They had pulled away from the gate and were about to taxi on the runway. And the woman's husband had called Southwest Airlines. They connected him to the gate. Their son had been in a tragic accident and was in a coma, and she was about to get on a plane and fly even further away from where he was. So he talked to the agents at the gate. They called the plane back to the gate, got the woman off the plane, got her on the phone with her husband so she could have a conversation with him. They had already rearranged her travel plans to send her to Denver where her son was. They provided her a lunch, and they gave her a private place to wait for her next flight. They did all that without asking questions of their bosses. They did that on their own initiative because they were empowered to do so because they had such a strong sense of customer focus as part of their culture. So I think what we need to do as an organization, if we want to be safer, we have to create that kind of culture where our employees are empowered to make decisions on behalf of safety. And when they make those decisions, whether we like them or not, we need to support them so that they know there is support for making those correct decisions. So I just want to wrap this up by having everybody have everybody think, but I think the important parts of having a safety culture, we always have to be thinking. We can't have anybody say it's not my job to think. If you're not thinking, you're not going to be safe. Everybody needs to think. It leads to good discussion, leads to questioning. If you're not questioning your boss, if you're not questioning employees, and peer-to-peer questioning each other if you think something is unsafe, if we're not brave enough to have questioning, then we're not going to have the right safety culture. And then the last word there is caring. The story I relayed with Brent and the story I relayed about my dad. We all have people that care about us and people that we care about. That's our motivation for being safe. So what I want to challenge you guys with is for you to walk away with thinking about who you care about and who cares about you, and think about what your motivations are for being safe.
I screwed up. I should have went first. I've got to follow that. So Stacy brings this up. A couple things. I'm one of those bad listeners that listens to respond. So as I was listening to Terry and Linda's speech and heard a few things. You know, Linda said if you hear things 3 times, then it sticks. And our presentations are all kind of along that lines. And you're going to hear it 3 times, and hopefully it sticks. The other thing I heard from Linda was basically we have this sunset rule. So those people who were against the seatbelt law, if they want it to fail and go away, what Linda said was, don't buckle up and die. I mean, that's really the thing, right? I mean, if our numbers go up, I mean, it's the most ridiculous argument you ever thought of, right? Okay, more people die, so let's get rid of the seatbelt law that will save more people. That's just insane. So, you know, that's not where we want to be. I get a weekly update on where we're at as a state with fatalities. And the number I got after this last week, we are one higher than we were at the end of October last year. And last year we'd gone up from the previous year, and we went up from the previous year from that. And Carlos mentioned that. So, you know, we need to really perform well to have a lower number at the end of this year. And 2 weeks ago, I also get an update about how many happened over the last week. 2 weeks ago, we had 1 for the whole week. This last week, we had 7. You know, that's 1 a day. That's just not something that I'm real comfortable with. So, to do justice to this presentation, Stacy should really give it. So I'll limp my way through it, but I definitely give credit to her. With that being said, since this is being recorded and broadcast, everyone should know that Stacy got a hole-in-one. So. How do you put the notes up there so I can see them? So as Terry mentioned, we spend a lot of time, a lot of effort looking at our strategic direction, what our goals are for the department.
Sorry.
No, it's all good. Like I said, if Stacy was given this, she doesn't need notes. It's a unique thing as you get kind of different positions in this department. Different people do stuff for you, and when you're not doing your own presentation, you don't know it nearly as well as Carlos just blows me away because he's up there wandering around, you know, Steve Jobs like with an earpiece, and he's got it all fixed with the governor's interaction and everything else. So it's a pretty cool thing, but I can do that when I put it together myself. Now Stacy's just panicking. I mean, you can see that it's just.
Where do I put the notes?
I don't know.
View?
I went through it.
Oh,
It's all right. I can look at them on this.
okay,
Let's go back to the presentation.
okay.
Okay. So as Terry mentioned, as Linda mentioned, we are very much committed as a department to the safety of our employees, to our customers, and really it comes down to that there is no other alternative than zero. We had a Scantor come in, and a Scantor, if you haven't been around one of them, is they bring other DOTs and federal agencies and so forth, and they kind of ship them around the country, and they visit other states and they talk about it. And we were talking about our zero fatalities goal, and I believe it was one of the federal agencies from another state said, well, why aren't you putting toward 0 deaths? And that's the other, so you got kind of the zero fatalities track, and you got towards 0 as the other track. I said, because 0 is not really realistic. You know, towards 0 means you're getting lower, but 0 fatalities, that's not realistic. And to hear that from one of your peers, someone involved in this, was just, I was extremely frustrated. And hopefully I contained it and didn't blow up too much. But I said, okay, well, we get asked this question a lot. I said, which person from your family is okay for the one to die? And he goes, okay, 0 fatalities. But to hear it from someone who's in this industry that's dealing with it day to day, it was shocking. hitting the right. So I got to advance this and that. One of the things we definitely have talked about a lot with our organization is how we do this together, how we do this with partnerships. As you can see there, we've got ourselves, we also have DPS, we got Highway Patrol, we got the Health Department, we've got our consultants, you know, Penn and Powers, we got our consultants that are helping come up with designs, our contractors that are just so vigilant about employee safety and the safety of the people driving along the roads and putting the right devices out there to keep everyone safe. So without our partnerships, we really don't get very far down this road of towards zero. See, did anyone catch that? I said towards zero instead of 0 fatalities. It's Kristen's fault. She wears that pin. I'm going to take it away from her. This has become my new favorite slide. So on the one side, you can see there's the engineering. So UDOT's always been an organization that's been very high in engineering. We lead the nation in some of our engineering innovations. But there's the other side. There's the behavior. And it's something that has now become a focus. And you say, okay, well, what can we do for behavior? Why would we worry about behavior? Let's just go ahead and let's make sure the roads are clear of snow. Let's make sure that we have safe roads and good curves and good lighting and well-marked pedestrian crossings and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But the reality is 93% of the crashes are due to human error. So we can affect 7% if we just worry about the engineering. That other 93% is a huge number. And, you know, how do we not start talking about that? And it's been a little bit of a leap, but once you start down this road of, hey, we can affect behavior, we can do something. When I first started with this job, and it's interesting to hear Shane say when I started in this job in August 2+ years ago, I remember DPS told us, flat out told us, you deal with engineering, we'll deal with behavior. And it, you know, it's probably a good thing I heard about secondhand, because it might not have been 2 years in this job. But I thought, you know, we got to get them past that, and we've got a great partnership with them now. Robert Hull, who was the predecessor in traffic safety to Robert Miles, he had started down that path of partnership, and he had some of those folks on board with it being a together effort, and but it wasn't the whole group. And now we've got some new folks there at DPS and UHP, and everyone's kind of gotten that message that this is an effort that we're going to do together as a team. So our 5 behaviors that we're focused on. Drowsy driving, well, that's fairly obvious. You know, anyone who's made that trip back from Wendover after a successful weekend of gambling and, you know, making sure you're not a state employee any longer because you're rich beyond your wildest dreams. That's why they're drowsy. They try to win it all. Distracted driving. It is one of the most frustrating things. I try to control, it's a controlled road rage when I see people texting and holding their phone up and trying to drive, and because I want to get one of them great big air horns and pull up next to them and honk. But I'm a little afraid they'll swerve into me. So I've stopped from trying to do that. Aggressive driving. That's what you do to the people who are distracted driving. Impaired driving. It is for so long, we have the benefit of living in the state and having, I'll use the word oppressive liquor laws. I guess it depends on your point of view. But there is a benefit. Now that I'm in this job and seeing these numbers, I'm like, okay, I can see where we could use some more restrictions. But, you know, on the flip side, people still make those choices. Carlos mentioned that number is going up as far as fatalities or DUI numbers. And the media did some things with the percentage of increase, but a lot of that's because we have such a small number. So statistically, it jumped up a lot, but the overall numbers are still really low compared to the rest of the nation, but they're still too high. And you look at the numbers, it's not a .08 issue. It's a 1 point something issue or a 2 point something issue. I mean, it's people that really have no regard for anyone else's safety. I just was reading an article about one on Heber Main Street. The guy basically crashed into another car and just kept backing up until we bumped it out of the way far enough so he could keep on going. And he was drunk, and he didn't have a license because he'd gotten convicted of a drunk driving offense earlier. Come on. I mean, there's only so much we can do with some behavior, but hopefully we can influence his influencers and make a change there. And then not buckling up. So every once in a while, I do something that maybe can be thought of as going over a line. I've had the opportunity to work in regions 1, 2, and 3, and I grew up in region 4. So I feel comfortable in doing whatever I want in any of those regions, and maybe that's a little bit much, but I'll tell you a story. So about 2 weeks ago, I'm driving back from Richfield, and in fact, there's some people from Region 4 that haven't heard this story. I come back from RPDU, Robert, and I've got 2 other UDOT employees in my car, and we catch up to a couple maintenance workers in a pickup truck. They're delineating. So they're driving along what shoulder it is on 89, which isn't much, but they're doing about 50 miles an hour, and everyone's passing them when it's safe. And they got their tailgate down, and their toolbox and tools are all sitting back there, and I'm like, you know, really all they gotta do is hit a bump and something's gonna pop out. And I thought, well, maybe I should do something, maybe I shouldn't. So as I pass them, I look, and neither one of them's buckled up. Well, now they're 2 for 2. So I turn on my blinker, I stick my hand out the window, and I just point. Pull over. They comply. I get out. We have a little chat about, oh, and by the way, now they're buckled up. And I thought, they buckled up for me. That's kind of odd. So I tell them, hey, you know, I really want you to buckle up. It's important to me. I want you to be safe. You might want to close your tailgate so your toolbox doesn't fall out, you know, and just be careful out there. And they're like, all right. I get back in the car. I start driving. I get on the interstate. I look at the people in the car and I go, they have no idea who I am, do they? They're like, nope. I go, they don't even know I work for UDOT because there's no logos on this car, do they? They're like, they don't have a clue. So I tell Carlos this story, and he's like, you're pulling people over? Chad got me a badge. I'm good to go now. But I said, they're UDOT employees. And the car I was in had EX Place. It just didn't have the UDOT logo on it. So anyway, I couldn't even tell you their names, but it matters to me. And so, you know, I'm going to do everything I can to get everyone out there to buckle up. One of the things we do is there's a lot of mass media out there. We reach out. Everyone saw the Twist video, or most people have. We've been on the Oprah Winfrey show. Not me personally. I'm more of a, you know, some of them reality shows, but we won't go into that. I figured it would be someone from Motor Carriers to bring it up, but no, I haven't been on Jerry Springer, but I know someone that has. Think about this. So, over 4 out of 5 people in Utah, 18 to 54, know about the Zero Fatalities program. And if you talk to advertising agencies, that's huge. That is a monster number to have that much awareness. It's actually 83%, so it's like 4 1/3 of a person or something like that. But we do a lot out there to let people know about us. But now we're trying to do the why. They know about Zero Fatalities, but what about the why? Here's the numbers. Carlos showed this earlier. People know about it. They know about the numbers. The media is waiting every year to find out where we're at. Like I said, let me go ahead and look at what the number was. I bet you Robert or Scott could tell me off the top of their head. 225 is what we're sitting at right now. Might be 226. I think we had one this morning. So I was in a motor carriers meeting with our board, and they brought up a random crash off of a tool we've got that was developed with Scott and his team called Numetrics. And they bring it up, and I go, well, you want to know more details about it? Because I know. And I spend probably an unhealthy amount of time worried about this number and the actual crashes. How are we getting out there? Well, we're trying every avenue we can. Community events, high school events, business safety fairs. In 2014, we held 81 safety events and reached over 150,000 people. Well, I saw today in the paper that the governor said there's 3 million now in the state. 150,000 it's a big number. There's 3 million in the state. How are we going to get to the rest of them? Well, hopefully those 150,000 people tell 3 or 4 people, and those people tell 3 or 4 people, and pretty soon we got the message across the state. Linda mentioned this. Don't drive stupid. The #1 killer of teens is motor vehicle crashes. Okay? If you know any teenagers, I've got a 14-year-old. They're stupid. Okay? I am not as worried about him driving as I am about my 10-year-old daughter. And, Carlos mentioned the Tesla that drives by itself. Terry mentioned, what do you do? Her father got seatbelts because of his children. I don't know how I'll afford a Tesla, but if it's the only car that's going to get my daughter around safely, I might have to figure out a way to buy one. Because it's the next big thing out there to keep people, not just necessarily Tesla. We also go to driver education classes. Well, I don't, but parent night. How many people here have been to a parent night? There's a few. I thought you went. Oh no, your daughter came back bragging. So we had, in 2014, we had 95 parent nights statewide. There's a lot of high schools out there. Stacy, any idea how many high schools?
153.
Okay, 95 out of 153 is a pretty good percentage.
Those we've done like 4, maybe 4 in one school, so we've only hit probably only 35 high schools.
So we've had 100 parent nights already this year.
Yeah.
Stacy does a lot of them. Were you the one that was late to the one in West Jordan?
No.
Robert's laughing. I heard about it today. He knew it was going to get back to me.
That's what you were supposed to do.
Parent involvement. So when parents are involved, it makes a huge difference. Teenagers are half as likely to speed, 70% less likely to drink and drive, 2 times more likely to wear their seatbelts, and 30% less likely to talk on their cell phone. Those actually seem pretty optimistic to me, but that's what the numbers say. I'm probably not in that talk on my cell phone thing. Terry got me in an accident one time, but we'll talk about that later. I was talking on the cell phone with Terry and rear ended the car in front of me at a stop sign. Just saying. So here's some of the reactions we've got, actual things that were sent in to our Zero Fatalities program. I just spent a life-changing hour at Harriman High School. Last night we had a very touching and powerful program. Came up to the host after and thanked them. These are the type of things, when people first show up, they're like, really, I got to go to a parent night? I know when it's end of the quarter and I got to go to parent-teacher. I'm married to a teacher, so she thinks it's important that we go. I'm like, the teacher's going to appreciate me not going because it's boring. But then we have, did I just click it again? Here's one of our driver's ed folks talking about parenting.
Zero Fatalities, just the campaign, to me is the best one I've ever seen associated with driver's ed. I think it's the most concise, it's simple, and it's the 5 driving behaviors, it's very easy for the kids to learn those 5. In fact, I center our curriculum around those 5, along with the skill training that we do. We focus on those 5, and I don't know, it's the best. That's why when I decided to do the parent night, it was easy to say, okay, we're going to do a parent night, but we're going to partner with Zero Fatalities to do it.
So I think we got it. This is a good sample.
Anything else you'd tell UDOT's leadership about this?
If you guys are wise, you will keep the Zero Fatalities program going. I'm surprised at 3 states that do it.
Yeah.
I'm shocked. I don't know what the other 47 are thinking. I really don't.
So having this type of support at the schools is critical to us getting the word out there. What we find is one of the influencers being the kids. You know, my kids will still, I reach for the phone, my son is just all over it. He's like, Dad, what do you need to do? He is very much against me not touching the phone, which is great. I'm all for it. As Linda mentioned, primary seatbelt law passed. The large gentleman in the middle, is that Perry?
Yeah.
Representative Perry, that definitely helped get us down this path. Again, we have this tug of war. We got the people out there arguing. You know, I know it's being recorded, but you know, if you don't like this, feel free not to buckle up. I'm gonna get in so much trouble at the end of this. Here are the 13% who still don't wear seatbelts. This, I told Stacy, we've got to have this in here, because, oh my.
Feel that I should be told what I have to do or not,
Uh-huh,
especially in a vehicle.
yeah. It's kind of your own, should be your own decision.
Yeah, I mean, that goes like there's smoking in your vehicle and whatever you want to do, turn up your radio loud, which I'll never do.
I don't, because if I was to get in a wreck, there's a chance that I could live by being thrown from the car than if I
Genius.
was stuck behind a seatbelt.
My real problem is just I get in my car and I go. I don't think about putting it on. I don't see a need to have it on unless I see a threat that would put me in a situation where, you know, I'm going through my windshield. So I just don't feel like I need to put it on.
So just to get a little background, we do these focus groups. This was a group that we selected that said, we do not wear our seatbelts. So we were asking them questions about, well, why don't you wear your seatbelts? And then we have more great ideas.
Oh, go back.
Uh-oh, what did I do wrong?
Feel that I should.
Oh, I didn't have patience.
If my husband's driving, either my car or his car, I have to put seatbelt on.
What does he say to you?
We're not pulling out until I put my seatbelt on. And if
man.
my son is in the car, if I'm driving in my car, he tells me to put my seatbelt on.
Okay, so you have a husband and a son who are urging you to wear your seatbelt.
Yes.
What do you say back to them?
I say, okay, and I reluctantly put it on.
Yes.
Same as
Laura?
Laura. What my kids force me to, I do. My wife has trained my kids to wear them all the time. They get in and just do it, and usually they don't think about it, but when they force me to, I will.
Yeah. How do they force you to? What do they say to you?
Just tell me to. Just Dad, your seatbelt on.
And? What do you say?
I'll do it.
Uh-huh.
I'm not gonna say no,
Because why?
because I want them to wear theirs.
You want them to wear theirs, but you don't want to wear yours. Why do you want them to wear
Because
theirs?
I want them to be safe or something.
Uh-huh.
Well, of course I want them to be safe.
I do if I'm gonna go on the highway. If I'm getting out of Tooele City, and then I put it on. Or if I have my grandkids in the car, like they remind me.
Ah, so your grandkids remind you.
Yes.
Uh-huh. So it sounds like in some cases, your loved ones are saying, buckle up. What do you tell them, your grandchildren?
Grandma forgot. and I'll put it on.
Oops, she
Yeah,
lies.
oops, karma forgot.
And then you do put it
I
on?
do.
Uh-huh.
So, I get the, I'm leaving Twila City, I want to get the hell out of there as fast as I can. But, you know, there's still time to put your seatbelt on. Let's see, if I can have the patience. So here's one of our recent television spots. When I first saw it, I thought, this is played in Utah County, no one else cares, this is goofy. But it's kind of sticking with me now.
Have a great first day of school, sweetie. Buckle up.
Good night, honey. Buckle up.
Buckle up. No, okay, I'm gonna tell him.
If you love someone,
Hey, Dad.
tell them to buckle up.
Buckle up.
So, again, it comes down to the entire influencing others. You know, that's who has that effect. That's, you know, they have, I buckle up. That's not that's a no-brainer for me. But some of these other, you know, behaviors, definitely my kids have an effect on me. And why do I do it? Because I like to see them grow up and have kids of their own. So, we are starting. Is there wood around here somewhere? There's no wood. Hopefully, a program to utilize some of the Star Wars mania and use that. So, opening night is December 18th. And if you go to the Zero Fatalities booth, and you can go ahead and enter to win tickets for opening night. We're gonna, oh, go ahead, Stace. I knew I was gonna screw it up.
It's a contest to the public, so UDOT's totally open to this. And if you, it's on our Facebook, it starts next week. So if you put a picture of yourself and maybe do a Star Wars theme, and it's gonna be a random drawing, and there will be opening, tickets to Star Wars opening night on December 16th. We have a theater at Megaplex Theater in Jordan Commons. So it starts next week and it will go through the 29th.
There you go. If you want to go opening night to your own Zero Fatalities theater and watch Star Wars, we've definitely got an opportunity for you. So the other thing, one of the things that Carlos does not miss, I mean, the guy's traveling all over representing Utah, doing a great job of trying to make an addition or a difference, not just in this state, but nationwide. One of the things he does not miss is the team memoriam event. And it's a fairly touching thing, extremely so. And I've got a couple clips here. Stacy's goal when I asked her to do this was to make me cry, so I'm glad she did this where I don't have to talk about it too much. So.
Turning to our Primetime 5 Insight report, as the oldest of 5 children, Jesse Jessen's parents remember him as dedicated and hardworking. But August 5th, 2012, his life abruptly ended. On the road to Zero Fatalities, his parents share his story and hope that it will inspire all of us to buckle up.
When I think of him, I think of just this big, huge, tall kid with this great, big, huge smile.
Hoodoo, because he looks like the hoodoos in Bryce Canyon.
Only 16 years old, Jesse towered over his classmates at a whopping 6 feet 7 inches.
His goal was to reach 7 foot. That was his goal.
Big Red.
Those who knew him say he was driven, motivated, and big-hearted. But more than anything, Jesse lived to play.
He loved all sports, anything competitive, but basketball was his passion.
A passion that began at 5 when his parents bought a toy basketball hoop. He carried his love of the game into high school with his dad by his side, coaching him.
He was worthy of playing minutes. He was key in all of our games.
In his sophomore year, the Bryce Valley Mustangs took second in state, but Jesse had his eyes on a state championship.
He went and studied the game more and was putting more time in.
Driven to win, Jesse practiced before and after school, preparing for the season ahead. But one bad decision would keep him from that championship dream.
The year he would have been a junior is the year he passed away that fall. And
wanting to keep Jesse's memory alive that season, the team placed a number 35 patch on their uniforms. It was his jersey number, and
Kevin Durant was his hero.
That year, the Mustangs won the state championship in double overtime, an emotional win for the small town of Tropic.
So one of the kids took the jersey in the overtime, held it above his head for the remainder of the overtimes, for a double overtime game. Pretty exciting.
A win Coach Jessen shared with his son at the foot of his grave. On the ring is Big Red, the number 35, and inscribed inside you find
more than a game in memory of Jesse.
After living and teaching in Tropic for 13 years, Eric and Tammy made a hard decision to move. And from time to time, the Jessen family returns to visit the town they still consider home.
But there's a lot of good memories here.
This time to spread a message, teamed up with Zero Fatality.
You buckle up every time.
Coach Jessen shares his son's story.
If I cry, that's okay. All right, you can cry with me.
A story that affected an entire community.
He wasn't texting, he wasn't speeding. He chose to disobey a simple rule.
A story that came to an abrupt end when a local EMT came knocking on their door one Sunday afternoon.
And the knock comes. It wasn't Jesse.
Jesse died when his tires caught the gravel on the side of the road. He overcorrected and his car veered out of control. He was less than 5 miles from home.
You can actually still see where the car dug into the road and pavement as he left the road.
The car reportedly rolled 4 to 5 times, ejecting Jesse during the metallic chaos.
Just a nightmare come true to have a doctor come in and tell you, I'm sorry, he didn't make it. It's words no parent should ever have to hear.
Finding the strength to carry on, the Jessen family still celebrates Jesse's birthday every year, and at every opportunity, remind everyone to buckle up.
But if we were to lose another member of the community, we'd be losing another piece of us.
On the road to Zero Fatalities, Jed Bowl, KSL 5 News.
So one of the things they didn't talk about is they would go ahead and change out his jersey as they came on and off the floor. So that's one life, one person, and we're losing over 200 a year. That's just too many. So I'd ask you to be an influencer, to make a difference. Whether it's just you don't buckle up now and you start, or you know someone else that doesn't buckle up and you ask them. But, it kind of starts here. Just those challenges that you get, that you make for yourself. And hopefully, Wilma's got to feel pretty good because, her effort to get the primary seatbelt law saves lives. And what better thing can you do than to help save lives? So, that's it. Thank you. We ended a little bit early. I don't see anyone with a question. Or is there any questions I should ask? All right, thank you. Enjoy the rest of the conference. Hopefully they're more uplifting.